Beyond display, museums as living cultural experiences. So are museums only places to see, or they can be places to feel and participate? So this engaging panel brings together Anupam Shah, Head of Art Conservation CSM VS Museum, Mumbai. He's an art conservation specialist with deep expertise in museum practice and safeguarding South Asian visual heritage. We also have Ahalya Matan, researcher, curator, and trustee, the Registry of Saris. She's a curator and textile researcher, nurturing contextual storytelling and dignified representation of India's material culture. Moderating the session, we have Manaswini KR. This is a conversation that asks how memory, dignity, and modern audiences can coexist.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. This is the penultimate session, and we have a very interesting session after this. This is also going to be quite engaging. So this is about museums and displays, and I'd like to start with a small comment on the word museum from the Greek museon, meaning the seat of Moses. Muses, which designated a philosophical institution, temple, place of study and contemplation, dedicated to the 9 muses. I find this funny because our land itself exudes poetry, history, hymn, song, dance, literature, science in every corner. So this is in itself, the land is itself the seat of the muses, and every stone has a story to tell. I am elated to share the stage with Mr. Anupam Shah and Mrs. Ahalya Matan this afternoon for our panel on museums beyond display. Given that, so I will start with the questions. I want them to do more of the talking because this is going to be a learning for me as well. Given that we live in an ethos that exudes culture, a very true living culture, I'd like to ask the first question on how one can emulate this in a closed space of a gallery. When does a museum move from being a repository to becoming a living cultural experience? I'll start with you, Anupam sir. So mic there, but you could also pick this, that's fine. You can just speak, I think.
When does a museum start to becoming a living cultural space from being a repository?
Yes.
Okay. We have been hearing often that our institutions have been just repositories of objects. Things have been kept for years, and the custodians are so grouchy. They close the doors for you. They don't let us see things. And it's all very backward, and it's all very non-progressive. And that is why we're going on to this aspect about how do they evolve into being living cultural spaces. But I think, from all these years in the field, I think there's one thing that personally I would like to also mention, that there has been great merit in locking up these things and keeping them aside for years. Everything has some merit. If it wasn't for that, you may not have much left. Yes. Okay. Monuments are also, all the stones are taken away to build other things, like that church that was mentioned was taken apart to do other useful things also. So everybody does things in good faith. It's not that they mean bad, but it's just that there's no other system in place to either proffer an element of an alternative idea or a facility thereof. And therefore, we must also remember these objects are not just there for kicks, for just enjoyment and entertainment. That's a fallout. These objects have been kept there so that they can be a reference for the future. Like what was mentioned earlier in the morning, all the recordings and all those things, if they were there, that would have been great. Had somebody just locked that recording up, it would have been great reference instead of being open to overwriting it with other recordings, Yes. So we must not make that very negative, that it has been closed. Because it was closed, now we can talk about evolution, right? So we'll go to that step also. Maybe I should let you say that
Yes,
first.
I would like to add to that by saying that I've also worked with Ali quite a bit. I'm going to call her Ali because that's how we refer to her at the Registry of Saris. And I think more than just the textiles that you display, the narratives and the display, the way it is displayed is a very much an important part of the fabric of the display itself. So would you like to look at this as a curatorial technique, or is it a philosophical shift? Because right now you look at, I mean, there are these beautiful saris that you've locked up and now you're bringing it out. And you have a unique way of displaying it as well. So how do you look at this? I mean, where does the curatorial or the philosophical shift happen?
So I'm, I'm going to quickly just take a minute before I answer your question. I'm not a textile person. I'm not a curator, which is why I find actually the question really interesting. I'm actually more like one of you in the audience. So I know just by a raise of hands, I can see some students. How many of you are students over here? Okay, so that's really fantastic. And how many of you are practitioners? Practitioners of dance, practitioners of art, practitioners of learning, practitioners of what we're broadly here to talk about today, culture. Yes. So when you ask a person like me, I don't have a practice in textiles or curation. I actually have a practice in making perfume, which is, you know, if you look at it, it's a lot like how you learn music. There's notes, there's compositions, there's harmonies. You put them together, and finally you have like beautiful ragas. So coming back to your question in terms of how one curates beautiful things, and also leaning into what Mr. Sahaya was just saying, when you lock up these beautiful, whether they're objects, whether they're saris, and all of us here, because we're sitting in Kalakshetra, and I can see so many people dressed in such beautiful Indian textiles, in terms of putting something out as a curation, you're looking for a narrative, you're looking for a story. But when you don't have as educated or scholarly background as someone like I do, but it is actually a very, I would say, a practice-oriented background, and that background involves actually learning from people who have had the benefit of an education like Manaswani. You're a practicing, both of you, you're practicing conservators, you're practicing curators, you work with these things, and you approach that scholarship with a certain amount of reverence, right? Exactly what you just said. Those objects were thankfully locked up, and therefore we have them today. So when you come to a subject like curation with a point of view of, okay, let's show the world this, and let's learn from this, there are things that you have to just be very, very sensitive about in terms of one itself is the object. We don't want the object destroyed while the whole process of enjoying that experience happens. But the other thing is, how do we place all of this? We're all wearing, just as a very small example here today, there's so many people in the audience with saris. How is this relevant to people like you and me today? So I think the starting point of anything that we do at the Registry of Saris is really seeking that point of inflection. Yes, we have this reverence for a certain kind of history, a certain idea of what India is, but why is it relevant here today?
Yeah, how do you have a piece of the cake, eat it, give it to the next generation? It's a fine balance that curators and conservators have to always worry about. That brings me to the next question about display. What must change in how exhibitions are designed if museums want to move beyond a static display? Because when we think of what a museum is, when most of us think of what museums are, they think of glass cases, they think of displays that are far too inaccessible when it comes to price, historicity, authenticity, etc. So how do we change how these exhibitions are designed, Anupam sir? Would you like some of your slides shown,
No,
please?
it's okay. I'll just answer a few of these things. So one is that first question of yours, that now that these objects need to come into creating a living cultural space in an institution. That's one. And the second is how is display.
Yes.
I think a lot of India is on a phenomenal overdrive in creating museums, in creating archives. So this is also driven interestingly by a little, it's not ahankar or ego or anything, it is also about the wish to perpetuate the memories of my family, perpetuate the memories of my corporate institutions. There is this phenomenal drive and now the opportunity to perpetuate these memories, and archives is a good platform for that, a delivery platform. Museums are good delivery platforms because maintenance of your cultural collections and holdings is becoming expensive. This is a fine practical way of making sure you do that also. So it's a win-win for a lot of people. Now, when these displays are so there are new materials coming in, new types of showcases coming in. And when we have some very time-tested systems of something that, I was here when I was in 1990, 1887, 88 was the time I came here, and it was sort of like this only here, yeah? And it's time tested. Now when new display systems are coming in, we must also realize that there is an audience for it. And sometimes if you develop some things and you say that this time-tested system is so good, we should keep it, the audience is disappointed कि आपने कोई development ही नहीं करा. Where was the growth? Where is the snazzy glass and polycarbonates? Where are the shiny surfaces, right? So I think the display systems that are changing around the world, there has been a time when a lot of these modern systems came into play. India has been slow to take them on because of a number of factors, and that has been, price is one of them, because these are essentially being imported. You may be launching lots of satellites in space, but I don't think we do a lot of simple things practically at the moment. So we are not able to reach that level of fabrication. That's number one. The quality is not there. The systems are not in place. And also, there is no precedence of someone else doing it before you. And that works very much in the country.
Yes, I'd like to also add, so when you talk about how the object has to be viewed or displayed, I can only think of the Met musical instruments department where, you know, apparently, I do not know this, as a conservator, I did ask I asked Kate, I think, I asked her what it meant. And she was telling me that these instruments are not meant to be kept inside glasses. So if they had a set of Veenas, they would get a Vainika from here, go there and play them. And the repair would be a lot more traditional. Similarly, in the West, the way they look at the tanka, they never point to it. Or when they touch the Guru Granth Sahib, they remove their footwear. I wouldn't call this appropriation, but I think culture has become so shared when it comes to object and tangible elements of it, that I think there should be a sensitivity when it comes to display as well. And you know, the first original Cristofori piano in the Met can be played. But if you go to the musical instruments gallery at the National Museum, none of them can even be touched. So this shift in how we approach the object has not happened in India yet. Would you agree?
Can I say something? Sorry, can I just say one thing because has been weaving here and there, speaking. This thing about how things have to be displayed, I think whether it is a textbook or anything, I think जो भी curator है, the one who is the curator, curare, to take care of something, how do you present it? I think one must be very clear as to who that audience is going to be. And then it cannot be one audience. One has to be not imaginative, but one has to be realistic in saying, for these set of objects, there will be this audience, and all audiences are meaningful. The object by itself has its physical, tangible form, and it has its intrinsic value, right? And for different audiences, their reaction and what they take away from it will be a little different. And we must respect that. And कहते हैं ना जीवन में you must have a guru or somebody to show you the light a little bit. Even for museums, it is important that whoever the administrators and the curators are, they must be able to have someone who can not tell them that this is the important aspect of it, but someone who can just put forth a few points that say these are points of attention which you may look and you may not look at. So I think if these little things are done, it becomes an enabling environment for an audience to appreciate an object, and that is how we ought to approach the display. By just keeping the object with due reverence at a place in whichever form.
Yes.
Can be a platinum showcase, can be a glass showcase, or could be just a cushion, appropriate cushion. And let those enabling elements be there for the audiences. And that is how we should approach our displays, and not this Western paradigm of only showing it in these climate control showcases and things for which we are all failing.
Yes.
Lumbini is coming up now.
You should show.
Lumbini as a museum is coming up, and they are struggling with this, whether to show it in its old style or how to import these phenomenal display cases from all over the world. I talk Gautam Buddha ji.
Yes. Exactly.
And how far away we are from the actual knowledge that.
So I'd like Ali to add to this, because I think we've worked quite extensively on display. We've had a lot of back and forth, because as a conservator, where you're told not to do certain things, and Ali would be like, no, I want it to be, the team would be like, no, I want it to be a certain way. So can we have Ali's presentation, please? So I'd like Ali to first speak about how we do this, and then you can show a few pictures of the display. So,
I think we should actually begin by completely acknowledging Mr. Saad's point of view. Our experience in the context of the larger scheme of things is only textiles. And because we approach our studies more from a practice perspective, we have a tendency to, this is at its most basic level, and I'm going to ask the audience to also think about this. If you were to go shopping for a sari or a textile, as an Indian woman, what happens? You go to your favorite shop, which in Chennai I'm assuming is Sundri Silks. Mr. Rajaram is sitting right here, right? You have all these beautiful textiles over there. You choose a color. There's always a man behind the counter. And what does he do? He pulls it out, he opens it, you examine the pallu, the border, the field of the sari. You're allowed to touch it, you're allowed to flip it to its behind. You know fully well whether it has, none of us have to go to school for this, but we know if a butta is jamdani, or if it's ikat, or, as consumers of this kind of practice, we ask these kinds of questions, which are at some level technical. So why I think Manaswini said to just show you all some of the display is that it is meant to provoke beyond a larger conceptual narrative of how we relate to the textile. And this is really where I have had severe disagreements with the conservation team, so you know that you're not alone in in any of this, where we've been told, please don't let people touch the textiles. So we are home, we are custodians to a large body of khadi textiles, which was Matan Singh's last curatorial work. And what happened with this, there were 2 sets of these 300 pieces of textiles made. And this, to the best of my recollection, is the only exhibition where people were allowed to touch the textiles, squish the textiles, put it on their face, smell the textiles. And this very romanticized story of how Mapu sees a bunch of school children walking past, and they're all blind children, and they've all touched the textiles and put it on their faces. And he says, how did you enjoy the exhibition? And one of the children says, oh, the khadi was so fine, it felt like I was being kissed on the cheek by butterfly wings or dragonfly wings, which is all very romantic. But at the end of the exhibition, almost nothing was left to salvage. And these were not even old pieces. They were pieces that were made by curation for this particular exhibition. And I think this happened in the year 2000. So the second set basically is now sitting with us. And if you just look at these slides, our audience, like Mr. Anupam said, is an audience that is an audience of practitioners, an audience of learners, where scholarship is approached from a very creative how to make it process. So the people who came for this exhibition were weavers. They are not interested in the front of the textile at all. They are really interested in, which is why you have all the documentation there of, okay, what is the count, how is it made, what is the reed like, is the reed bamboo, is the reed metal reed? And if you go to the next slide, this is how the exhibition was approached. So in terms of how you display things, there was very little, a lot of thought actually went into how to make it more practitioner approachable, because it's very different from how a crafts council member would approach the same objects, textiles, right? Or very different from how you would approach the textiles at, say, a shop. Having said that, there is always on site at any of the exhibitions that we do a very strong, and you can attest to this, conservation team that comes in before the exhibition starts. They set everything in order. If a piece is even slightly soiled, it's removed. So a lot more work actually happens than just the display of textiles. If you go to the next slide, so you'll see these are now precious, because many of these weaving techniques at this point of time cannot be made, but that doesn't mean there is no hope for the future. One of the reasons we follow this practice is that we want people to take that chance, take that leap of faith. And maybe you can talk about your own sari then.
So this was an experiment. So I saw an old historic munda, set munda that was at the Registry of Saris, and I got to conserve it. So I took a picture of it and sent it to Vadaseri, which is the place where I get my saris and, basically the veshtis from. And I told him I wanted this accent here. And it's a lot smaller and thinner. And I told him I wanted this accent here. I took a picture and sent it to him. And a friend of mine who also works at TRS, we told him that if it is good, we'll give you more orders. So it turned out decent. There's a lot more to work on. Just keep going ahead. So these are the displays that TRS does. And there's this one sari. Just keep going. You'll come to this sari.
Really, the point of this kind of curation and display is to encourage practitioners is to encourage practitioners to actively participate in not just the
the history of the object, but also in the future of the object.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Ali. Now I would like to talk to Anupam sir about. So all of us know that Anupam sir has actually he has conserved an Egyptian mummy, right? And that's the only one in CSMVS that we have in India, and which is pretty amazing because in India we have so little of human remains. I think I haven't seen a lot of them. So, but I do have a question to talk about the ethics behind displaying human remains or deeply sensitive material. So, there is obviously a need to replicate things, and there is a lot of efforts done to make things a lot more easily accessible. But these are objects that nobody has access to, and but however, you do need to display it. But how do you display it to honor these remains? That's another question. How do you conserve them while honoring? I mean, what goes in your mind? Because I've never seen or even like experienced it. I mean, a sari is easy to handle. You can wear a pair of gloves and you can handle it. But what is it that goes behind? How do we honor what is being shown, and how do we honor when you touch it?
So I think when there are things that are sacred for us and we are displaying them, so if we know that they are sacred, then we display them with a certain amount of reverence, and there are certain collection care protocols that one follows and one practices them. But how do you display it for an audience about it being sacred? So I came into this space in the morning and I thought I was late, and I walked in and then realized that you ought to open one's shoes. And I just walked out and I opened it. So the place is imbued with that aspect of sacredness. It's up to the person who's then engaging with it to be made to realize or realize by oneself. And that changes the conduct of the individual. Because after all, we are talking about the human interaction with the tangible cultural object. So I think that little direction, that interface is extremely important. And that is why institutions in our countries now, also in Africa and in India, what is happening is we are creating the space, we are creating the infrastructure and the displays and everything, but not the people who will then guide the audiences into that. So that human engagement is where the biggest education and input has to go in. And that is how we approach, whether it is human remains or whether it is other sacred objects.
Yes.
Both of them.
I think that's very beautiful, because in the museum, the National Museum, you have a relic, the Buddhist relic, and you have a lot of Sri Lankans who take off their slippers in the previous gallery and enter that.
Allow them that scope also.
And they
don't
meditate
tell them,
too.
don't open your shoes.
Yeah.
No, that's it.
I think it's a very tricky.
If you have 10 minutes, I'd like to show the audience a little bit about, when you talked about museums being living cultural spaces, I personally believe that it also wakes, many things in life have a reflexive relationship. If A equals to B, then B also can equals A, And I think with museums also, for them to evolve from being static repositories into living cultural spaces, we must realize that institutions that have no collections instead can then recreate a cultural space, and that leads to a museum also.
Yes.
So I think it works both ways. I'll give an example. You've shown a sari collection inside a physical space. I'll show it in a living cultural space in the external environment. Yeah.
Yes. It is.
That's okay, so that you can see that better. You can take the light off me. Thank you. Okay. So, it's okay. I'll straighten it to whatever it can be straightened to. Yeah, can I have the next one? So, okay, so this is conserving cultural objects and sacred objects, and we need to take care with technologies as well as with conventional systems and traditional knowledge-based protocols which have stood the test of time. Next. So these were the questions that you placed forward, them as static repositories, public engagement, what should be the curatorial strategies, what about the space for dialogue? Next. This is my hometown. Again, they talked about the sacred pyramid. So storytelling becomes part of it. And therefore, storytelling becomes one of the central points of making a museum into a living cultural space. Next. Again here, you have this phenomenal monument in Gujarat. It is important, if there is to be something, some value to be added, and if you feel that you have to preserve that element of cultural heritage, it has to be accorded a significance. And the significance does not come from anywhere. A human being has to think and extract and put a value and significance to that object. This lovely Adalajni Vav is very important, and just outside was this tea shop, and this person came and he took care of that board, and he restored it, he conserved it, he put it straight back again, he preserved it. For him, that is of phenomenal significance, because that is the way the customers will come to that person's shop. It is important to understand the significance of things. Next. Whether it is manuscripts. Next. The significance of objects. It is then that these becomes hallowed objects inside a cultural space and then showcased as museum pieces. Next. And for us to be able to then develop our institutions into living cultural spaces, sometimes from our work also, we have to draw back. This is the same river. That is a close-up of the river when you're standing too close to it, and this is from a distance. So sometimes our own work in our life, we also have to draw back from it and then see it as to where is it that our life is heading, and where is it that our institution is going at the moment. Next, please. And we recommend to have a nice systems approach that engages with various aspects. Next. I'll give you this example. So this was a village, 5 minutes. This was a village, Raghurajpur. It had nothing. It had a lot of issues. Next. It had a lot of issues, and there was no collection, but in the entire region of Odisha, the wall painting tradition was getting lost. Next. We took up the village. We said the idea is, let's bring and document, which was also mentioned today in the morning. Let's document all the wall paintings of Orissa from around, bring them to this space, and recreate them in terms of historical aspects, in terms of motifs that are getting lost, because sometimes some vernaculars get lost because predominant cultures push them away, whether it's cuisine or whether it's languages or whether it is art. Next. You have conversations, you create the space for dialogue. Let the idea come from within the people by repeated conversations. Next. You create the traditional technologies, lime plasters. Next. We brought all the materials together, and the lime mill was created in another location first, because your first projects should not fail, otherwise skepticism sets in. Next. And then storytelling. We had workshops on how to represent the deities. Artists, youngsters are forgetting today, just like the young weavers are forgetting the weaves and the patterns. Similarly, the artists are forgetting the iconography. So workshops were held to be able to. He is showing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which angle he has to be, uttare unki kaisi hoegi, like that. Next. They're learning all the drawings. Then somebody has to. So they said, okay, the idea was to fill up this village with wall paintings in the traditional style with lime plasters. But who will agree to break a wall of cement and then put a traditional lime plaster? 1 or 2 people agreed. Once they agreed, the entire village came forth. Next. And the drawings started. They created all the drawings. They started creating the drawings here. Next. The women came forward. They said, let's create the pigments for it in the traditional styles. So the hingul, the hartal, and all these pigments came together. Next. And all the old artists, the motifs which had disappeared, all the ancient traditions of wall paintings were again brought forth. People came from 28 districts, lived in one village for 1 month to create the wall paintings, which had become completely lost in terms of the lexicon of the artist's oeuvre. Next. He's creating this in the Dharakot style. Next. That's from Ganjam. This is a type of motif that was lost. Interestingly, when people made their teams, no son worked with the father. They all worked with the grandfathers. It's interesting how the transmission was. Next. And then the whole thing came alive. The whole thing came alive. This became a living museum in the making. Next. And the Puranas and the stories from all the things. Next. Ye dash dikpal banana hai. And this mother used to every day bring her baby and put him here. And on a height, and because they know whole day they're painting, so they look after the baby. So they had forgotten kaun se dikpal ki disha, in which direction it is. So they brought it all. They had to erase it a number of times. But it was an exercise on how to bring back your systems in place and the rigor of it. Next. The ladies came forth. Like many professions in the world, wall painting has also always been a male domain. This time the girls said, no, we're also going to paint. The men said, no. Women don't paint. They just grind the pigments. They said, no. This is the 20th century, you know. So they said, okay, do, but make your own teams. And the girls said, yeah, that's what we want. We don't want to work with you guys. The girls came forward. 6 or 8 teams came forward and they created these phenomenal murals. Phenomenal. Babita got married afterwards. Unke dimag mein, she had in her mind about this is a marriage procession. People are coming to see. Then there's gifts happening, and then she got married. So it was playing in the mind, so she represented that. Next. And eventually the whole village came alive with wall paintings. It became a living museum of wall paintings of the entire state of Orissa. In fact, that's Guru Maguni Das, Kelu Babu's brother. This gen. Yeah. Next, please. And this whole references came. This became a reference, an art historical reference, living space. This is from, the way the Krishna is represented in the Bugada area. Next. The Rag and Ragini is represented in pictorial methods. So there were so many visuals of these. Next. The Usakoti murals. Next. The motifs from the Dharakot temple. Next. The motif from the Biranchi Narayan Mutt in Bugada. Next. Look at the beauty of it. Krishna holding her breast, cupping her breast, holding her close to her. There's a moor here. There's a peacock here. There's a banana tree there. Next. And it comes alive with light. The use of pigments, only geru and only black in different dilutions, and how it comes forward. But Chitra was mentioned earlier in the conversation. Next. So this is how it happened. Next. And we're closing. So this led, also when it leads, the usefulness of it, this led to phenomenal aspects of development of livelihoods. Not just the development of the museum in a space, not only the revival of wall paintings which were disappearing, but also these people are now fated for their lime working skills, for conservation, for civil infrastructure and everything. Next. The girls are getting livelihoods. They brought it into the mainstream. Next. Yeah. And news, that's Amitabh Khan that time, so many years back with Mr. Jagmohan. Eventually they came. We actually wanted roads and water and sanitation, so we used the whole thing to strategize the development of about 60, anyway, I'll tell you. Next. Eventually, this caught on. This was declared a heritage village, and the government of India launched the rural tourism scheme. 55 sites were developed across the country. The mistake was, like we were talking in the morning, somebody mentioned, the government and the system, because they have to follow a certain protocol, it's public money. They tried to replicate it in the rest of the country, and that is where it failed. You cannot just replicate something somewhere. You've got to take it in your stride at that place with the local inputs and then create it. Next. Yeah, we got the roads, we got the scholarship scheme for the children, for the Gotipur dancers, the fellowships, the studios. Next. Yeah, next. Aise karke. Panchatantra mein there is a lovely verse. And that is what I want to say about your museums when we are talking about developing them into something bigger than their main purpose of collecting and being a repository for objects. It says, in case of horse or book or sword, in case of woman, man, or lute or word, the use or uselessness depends on qualities the user lends. So as stewards and custodians of museum objects, you have to see what qualities you can give to that entire collection so that it can be useful for the world and so for the museum. Thank you.
Thank you. Um, can we quickly have TRS's? Can we have quickly TRS's presentation again? It was a beautiful presentation, and this was exactly what we were aiming to sort of unveil in this conference itself. How do you make culture accessible? How do you make it a lot more, I mean, it's very living and it's very now, and we need its relevance to continue to exist through livelihoods, through its representation everywhere. So that was very lovely, and that also looks at conservation from a very different point of view. It's not just in a lab on a table, but it's out there, and your replication of ideas, thoughts, iconography. Talking about that, and you've spoken about paintings and about Raghurajpur, and I would like Ali to also add very quickly about her work with brown cotton. I think she wanted to just add a couple of points.
I think so. In the collection of the Registry of Saris, we have some colored cotton, which means that it comes out of the earth naturally colored. And these saris, of course, these textiles are very precious because the cotton itself in 2017-18 was not available. So when we did these very theatrical displays of exhibition that you had seen earlier, we were approached by the University of Agricultural Sciences, Dharwad, that happened to have India's oldest seed bank. So just in terms of how a repository can also then be turned into, I wouldn't say a living museum because we are not a museum space, but just in a cultural vein to take things forward. So this cotton was then licensed. The 40 years worth of research had been done by the University of Agricultural Sciences in Dharwad. We license the seeds, we grow the cotton at the university. It is processed there, so it's ginning is done, spinning is done, the weaving is done over there. It's not the finest kind of cotton, but it is representative of India's heritage in terms of just the seeds and the plants that we had at one point of time that were during colonization just put away. So these processes sometimes take a long period of time. Over, say, we started I think with 2 acres the first year, we're in our 4th year now, and now we have about 10 acres. The production is so small that to think of it as a commercial project is almost hilarious. So this project is currently still at the Red Fort, but it shows you everything from seed to scientist, farm to farmer, and then finally how the cloth is turned into fabric. There's a whole,
Yarn to fabric. That's okay. Yeah, the yarn is turned into fabric. So basically, this is a short staple cotton that comes out brown. And I do not know the technicalities behind it because this is all that we've... So it is brown in color naturally. So the beauty of the textiles, so we make the cotton, we spin it. I mean, I'm talking as part of the Registry of Saris. I go there very rarely.
This project was also done with the Kalakshetra Foundation.
Yes.
So the loom was set up, the weavers came in,
Yes.
and it continues today. So sometimes, we're only in, I think, fourth, almost 5th year, and it's 10 acres now. And it may seem completely insignificant, but it does have not just the quality of the cloth, but more what it gives to you in terms of that cultural shift from an object into, from viewing an object, the cultural shift happens into practicing the process of making something come into creativity.
Yes. Yeah, that's perfect. I thank Anupam sir and Ali for being here this afternoon, and what brilliant presentations. It was just supposed to be a panel discussion, but it turned into a full-blown lecture on how we can make parts of the country into museums itself. I would now like to close by saying that I think as youngsters we have great responsibility as custodians of culture to bring this forward. And I think they're doing such immensely great work that we need to get inspired from. Please give them a round of applause. I thank them for generously coming here and spending the whole day with us, and for also their inputs. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ali. Thank you so much.